Okay, welcome to AFC's filing for an impartial hearing on your own. We just started the webinar. We are going to give a few minutes for people to come in.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Affey, and I am the Charter Schools Attorney at Advocates for Children. And I'll be working today to help you go through this process.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm Allison Gutu. I'm a supervising staff attorney at Advocates for Children and the pro bono coordinator as well. So I organize our pro bono cases with law firms.
And I'm Kim Madden. I'm the Director of Family Support at Advocates for Children. Yeah, and we're going to be, going through a few more minutes, waiting for people to sign in, and then we'll start. One question I'll answer now that we do always get is that we will be providing the PowerPoint and actually a recording of this training after the training. It should be sent out by the end of the day tomorrow.
If you're having trouble hearing any of us, please, should they put that in the Q&A, Kim? I see a note in the chat that says that someone can't hear us.
Yeah, I just saw that. Can other people hear? Okay, we're hearing some people can hear. Okay. I'm sorry for the person who is having trouble hearing. One thing I've had with my computer with Zoom is sometimes if I put in headphones, it actually is louder. I have no idea why. And it's also helpful to know the chat is up. We actually had meant to not have the chat because we do want people to use the Q&A, but I'll keep it up for right now while we're waiting to see if people have more issues with things. Okay, it sounds like people can hear.
Like everyone can hear. So I think we should jump right into it. All right, welcome everyone. So today we will be discussing how to file an impartial hearing on your own. And in addition, we will also be discussing some alternative dispute resolutions that if a hearing isn't necessary for you, there are some other options that you may have. Before we begin, if you would like to hear this presentation in Spanish, please use the number, the 917 number, and the PIN, which begins with the number 1. I'll let a few seconds if anyone wants to dial that number or put down the PIN. Oh, one thing I will note, this, as Kim said, this presentation will be made available afterwards, so you do not feel the need to furiously write down everything that we're saying. Please, you can listen and try to think of questions you may have or thoughts you may have. Okay, so today, here's the agenda. We're going to first go over what are your goals? And depending on what your issue is, depending on what your problem is, it will determine what path is best for you. And the first question you may want to ask yourself is, what are my goals? What am I seeking to get from going through a dispute resolution process? And once you've identified what your goals are and what your issues are, the next question would be, well, how do I create a solution to my problem? And that could be through an impartial hearing. It could be through mediation. It could be through just communication with the school or the DOE. And we'll get into how those look and how those are different from each other. So you've decided, you have a set of goals, you have a set of issues, and then next is, what are the solutions? And then you want to say, all right, now I know what I want to see. How do I build my case? What are the questions that I need to ask myself? Who are the people that I need to speak with? What documents will I need? And how do I go through the process so that I can get what I need? And then we'll just go through the nuts and bolts of an impartial hearing. Impartial hearings can be a little complicated. They can be a little messy, but I think the process, any parent can do it and they can do it really well. And that's hopefully we can help guide you that way. But we really think that this is a process that doesn't have to be daunting for parents. It's a process that you all can do on your own and do it very well. A little bit about our organization. So Advocates for Children, AFC, we are an independent agency, and our goal is to protect the educational rights of all students within New York City. And our services include, and one of our most useful resources is our helpline. And the helpline number is right there. And you can dial that number for any question you may have, big or small. It could be about an impartial hearing, or it could just be a simple question of who do I contact for this document? We also have guides and resources at our website, advocatesforchildren.org. We do workshops and trainings. We also have a YouTube page that has these webinars up. And we provide free legal services to low-income families. We're also monitoring the pandemic and the COVID-19 issues and how those are affecting schools, public schools, charter schools, and we're consistently monitoring. We update as needed, and it's a very helpful, well, I think it's a very helpful resource to figure out what's going on, because as we all know, things change so quickly. One day school starts September 10th, the next day it starts September 21st or September 16th. It really depends on who you ask and when you ask them, when you know. So we try to stay abreast of those issues, and we try to keep live updates. And that can be found at our website. Also, although we will be providing you with guidance on how to go through a process that may be legal in nature, and that we want you to learn your rights and to think about creative ways to solve your problem, this workshop is not legal advice in itself. And if you do have any legal questions, you should consult an attorney or an advocate. Okay, so we have a poll that hopefully everyone is able to participate in.
So we're going to give people a few minutes to answer the poll here. Can see. It's really helpful for us to know who's here. Also, just want to make sure that it was clear. I did disable the chat because it gets a little distracting to have both going. But if you do have a question, you can ask in the question and answers. And I'm going to try to answer things as they come in. If it's something that's more complicated or there's a whole lot of questions on the same thing, we may pause and answer questions then. Otherwise, we will have time for questions at the end. Okay, so we have enough people on. Let's see. All right, so it's mostly other professionals, but a good number of parents and educators. So that's interesting. Okay, one more poll. Okay, we want to know where you're coming from. Where in New York do you live? Manhattan and Brooklyn are tied right now. Bronx is slowly catching up. Queens. All right, that's good enough. All right, so from all over the city, except for Staten Island, we didn't do so well there. Okay, and one more question, and this last one really helps us understand if there's any way that we should be tailoring the training that we're doing today. So we want to know why you came to this. Did you do it because you already filed a hearing on your own? Because you want to file, you think you need to file, you just want to learn more about the process, or other? I do see a lot of other. At the end of this, after the whole thing is over, there's going to be once we stop the webinar, a new thing will pop up from Google. It looks a little different, and it's a survey. We'd love to know in that. We have, some questions that are basic survey questions, but also open-ended ones, and it really, really helps us. We read them all. If you can let us know if there were things that were helpful, if there's things you think we should do more of. So I'll share this right now, but it looks like nobody's filing a hearing on their own. You just want to learn more about the process. And actually a significant number of people chose other. So do fill in the questions and answers if there's things we're not getting to today. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Kim. All right. All right, so you've identified some issues with your child's services or your child's school or any issues you're having, and now it's time to think about your case. So where do you start? Well, one, you identify the problem. So for example, some common issues may be the IEP is incorrect. The IEP has, or you agree with the IEP, you think it's a good IEP, but it's not being implemented properly. Or you're recognizing that the instruction your child is receiving is not working. You got an evaluation, you received an updated IEP, but for some reason, the program is not working. Or you just need more information. And next, you want to identify the solution. So now we know what the issue is. What is it that you're going to want to request? What is it you're seeking? Do you want a better evaluation? Do you want an evaluation? Do you want different instruction? Do you want to send your child to a new school? Do you want documents or meetings to be translated into your language? And then how do you get to the solution? There are several forms of dispute resolution, and we'll be getting into the most common ones. And there's informal and formal dispute resolution. And this is the way we've laid out the questions is kind of how, if you do go to hearing, a hearing officer might think about the issue themselves. Well, what's the problem, and what is it that the parent wants to see done? So for informal dispute resolution, you want to start with the school. And this could be the parent coordinator, it could be the principal, it could be a teacher, it could be a school psychologist, it could be someone that you trust at the school. You want to open up that line of communication first, because there may be a quick solution to your issue, or the school may have an idea of who in the DOE they can contact to figure out an answer. You can also reach out to the district superintendent's office. This could be the family support coordinator or the district family advocate. Next, you may want to reach out to the borough support organization. So this would be the administrator of special education. And the DOE Central. Here's the number and there's the email, but you want to make sure that you've established that one, the answer to your question may be easier than you think. And two, you also want to demonstrate that if you unfortunately do have to go to a hearing or mediation, that you have cooperated with the school. You've cooperated with the DOE. You've tried to reach out through various forms of communication to various people. You've tried. And unfortunately, you either haven't gotten an answer or the answer was unsatisfactory. So now we'll get into some forms of the more common forms of formal dispute resolution. That's mediation, impartial hearing, or a state or Office of Civil Rights complaint. So what is mediation? For one, both sides have to agree to mediate. And if you do want mediation, and by both sides, I mean you and the Department of Education. And you would need to file a request with your school, the CSC, or with the mediation office. And that information can be found in the links on this page on the DOE website or the State Education Department website. We'll note that mediators do not make decisions or issue orders. They can't tell the DOE to do X, Y, and Z. Their job is to be neutral. Their job is to work with both parties to see if there is an agreement that everyone is satisfied with. Now, if you do choose to go through mediation and it doesn't work out, there is no agreement that can be reached, don't worry, you can still file an impartial hearing. It doesn't prevent you. Mediation works most effectively when you're seeking services at your school or if you're seeking a different public school program. All right, and let's say, filing a state complaint. When would you file a state complaint? It can be the most useful for simple goals, such as obtaining evaluation or issues with busing or obtaining makeup services. This is something that you would file with the State Education Department, and they would attempt to address the issue. Now, although the goals, it makes more sense for simple goals, I will note that with the State Education Department, the remedy, it may in itself be limited. So for example, you may want an evaluation or you may want certain services, you may want a program change, but it's possible, and we've seen that with SED, it may be that they'll order an IEP meeting so that you and the DOE can come together to figure out what the student actually needs. And it may be less likely that they'll issue something mandating an evaluation or busing or makeup services. It doesn't mean it doesn't happen though. And as with everything else we're discussing, if you file a state complaint, that doesn't preclude you from engaging in other forms of dispute resolution as well. And you can find a sample complaint and how the process goes on the SED website. Okay, so the hearing process itself. Me and my colleague Allison, she'll get into more of the meat and potatoes of the hearing process, but to kind of set the table and to keep with this food analogy, one, you would file a hearing request. And then after you file that hearing request, there will be a resolution session and pre-hearing conferences. There will be the hearing and then a decision. And we will get into detail how each of those looks. Now, before you file, here are some questions you may want to ask yourself. And these are questions that not only will help you determine how to build your case and what your issues are, but these are also questions that the impartial hearing officer, the partial hearing officer is somewhat like the judge of the impartial hearing. These are questions that the impartial hearing officer will also be very interested in. And we chose 3 of the more common issues that we've seen with impartial hearings, but of course this list is not exhaustive. So for example, let's say you're having an issue with your child's IEP. You want different services, you want a new program, The first question that you might want to ask yourself is, when was the last IEP? Because it's very important, one, that the DOE can establish, or that the DOE can establish that they have been doing annual IEPs. They've been doing IEPs on time, and they've been doing them every year. So if you ask yourself this question and you recognize, oh wait, it's actually been a couple years since my child's IEP, or there was an IEP last year, but I'm noticing that there weren't annual IEPs. These are questions that will be of interest to the impartial hearing officer. Do you agree with the IEP? Is it an IEP where you told the IEP team that I don't think this is appropriate for my child, or did the IEP team itself agree with some of the recommendations on the IEP? Was there a recent evaluation done? Was there an evaluation done that you agreed with, that the IEP services were based off of that evaluation? So, and did you voice your concerns when you were at the IEP meeting? These are all questions that impartial hearing officer would be very interested in knowing. For an evaluation, same as IEP, when was the last evaluation? Did you understand the evaluation? Was it explained? Did they go over the results with you? Did you agree with the evaluation? And did you voice those concerns? And that slides right into the next bubble, which is communication. Have you discussed your concerns with the school, the DOE, the CSC? It'll be very important to show that you or your client worked hard. We reached out, we cooperated, we tried to do what was best. We've been patient, and it's a question that the impartial hearing officer will also be very interested in knowing. What was your level of outreach with the school, with the DOE? And my colleague Allison will get into this in a bit more detail, but a couple questions you also want to ask yourself are, who will you call as a witness, and what will they say? And when you ask the question of who you will call, it's kind of a why. Why is that person important? Do you have people that you can call as witnesses? And documents, what documents will you use and why? And these documents could be IEPs, evaluations, emails, referrals, but which documents would you use? And these are all questions that you should ask as you're thinking about, how do I build up my case? And as far as the first step, you've asked the question, what are my problems? You've answered it with, here are my problems. What are the solutions? You have a set of solutions that you want, and you're ready to file. So the first step is actually filing, and there's a 2-page form, and the hyperlink is in the PowerPoint. And you can fill it out with Adobe, or you can print it and fill it out by hand. It's very important that you leave a phone number where the DOE can reach you between 9 to 5 on weekdays. And it's very important that you list an email address that you check regularly or have regular access to. It's very important. And if you need an interpreter to speak your language, please speak up. Do not be afraid. Please let them know that you need an interpreter. Okay, and now I will be passing over the rest of this presentation to my colleague Allison.
Yeah, there's just going to be a short pause while Allison takes over control. We've got to switch screens for just 1 minute. Allison, you're muted, I think, still. Oh, you got the slides.
All right, we got 17 and we have sound. All right, great. So now to thank you, Michael. And now to continue into some of the, as described, perhaps meat and potatoes, but you know, for more vegetarian types, perhaps this is the tofu and the broccoli. All right. So in your request, say what's wrong. For example, if there are issues with the IEP, or if there are, for instance, behavior needs, you can include both of these in your hearing request. Again, these might be that the IEP is wrong, that the IEP you agree with, but it has not been implemented by the school, or that the IEP is not informed by current evaluations and you need new evaluations. Behavior needs can include your child having been bullied, or your child being disciplined or suspended unfairly. State what your child needs, right? This is getting to the remedy or the solution. Do you need a change in the IEP? Do you need for the department to pay for tutoring or to provide therapy, including physical therapy, counseling, speech therapy, occupational therapy? Are you looking for a private school or private services? And again, are you looking for a new evaluation or something else? The first thing that will happen after you file your hearing request is the hearing office will email you. And it's a sort of very formulated, long, lengthy email that we'll go into in the next section, next slide. So this is a do not reply email. It's not a sort of a person, it's an automatic email, and it will list your child's name and the 6-digit case number. So you want to look in this email to find who is the DOE representative or attorney. And that's the attorney or representative who might not be an attorney, but who's representing the Department of Education in this case. So your opponent, if you will. And then who is the impartial hearing officer, and the contact information for both of them. The case number, as I mentioned, because you will need that for the hearing. The email should also include a copy of your hearing request with a stamp or a notice that the hearing office received it. Finally, you want to look for the resolution compliance date, because that will give you an idea of when you can sort of start to request to schedule the hearing. If you have problems with getting the hearing scheduled, getting a hearing officer appointed, or having hearing officers recusing themselves or removing themselves from taking on this case, and it's going on for a long period of time, you can contact the hearing office at the number or the email below, or contact the case manager, which is another section you'll want to look at in this first email. This is what it looks like. You'll see this is only the first half of it. And so the highlighted sections are the kind of information you want to extract. So the case number, and then secondly, the impartial hearing officer appointed. Hopefully there will be a name of a hearing officer next to that line. The hearing office is very backed up right now, and there often will not be a name of a hearing officer next to that line, unfortunately. The next thing you'll want to look at is the resolution period compliance date. You'll see for this hearing, the date of the request was September 6th, 2020, right above that second highlighted section. And the resolution period compliance date is 30 days after that, so October 6th of 2020. And we'll go into the resolution session and the resolution period a little bit later, but that's something to note. And then you want to make sure to get the contact information for the Department of Education representative and the impartial hearing office contact, which is the case manager. And the case manager does just that, sort of manages the case and can communicate or pass messages along to the hearing officer and sort of answer some of your questions. So the next thing that may happen is the resolution session. This is a meeting that the Department of Education has the right to offer to try to resolve the claim successfully with you without having to go to a hearing. Keep in mind that all of these sessions and meetings are by phone right now due to COVID-19. You should always respond to the meeting request for the resolution session, but you can ask to waive or cancel the session if you don't think that you'll be able to get what you need from the session. So in general, respond and consider attending the session. If you know that you can't get what you need, or you know that it's going to be difficult, for instance, if you are seeking private school tuition, that's not something the department can resolve at a resolution session. That would need to go through the hearing process or settlement process. Then you can ask to cancel it. Consider if you do attend the resolution session, full agreement versus partial agreement. So you'll discuss the options that the department can provide to you to fulfill the solution you're seeking. If you are seeking compensatory services and also a change in the, and also let's say speech therapy services, and you go to the meeting and are able to agree with the department for compensatory services, but not for the speech services, then you want to make sure that anything that you sign agreeing to the compensatory services says that this is a partial agreement, not a full agreement. And if it's a partial agreement, you most likely want to proceed to hearing on the items that you are not able to resolve at the resolution session. Also keep in mind, be careful about an agreement which lists an IEP meeting to consider changes, because an IEP meeting to consider, let's say, changing the classification of your child from, like learning disability to autism to speech impairment, whatever it may be, is not actually a guarantee that the IEP meeting will make those changes. It's just an offer of having an IEP meeting. So just be aware of that. After the resolution session, you have 3 days if you change your mind after signing it to make a change and to proceed fully to hearing. Also, after the resolution session, you can begin to ask the hearing officer to schedule the hearing. So you get that date on the calendar. After that, you'll have disclosure, and disclosure is really just your evidence. So it is documents that you want to bring to the hearing to prove your case and to show what happened with your child, what your child needs, and perhaps what your child did not receive from the Department of Education. So the first step is to gather your documents. This can be IEPs, report cards, progress reports, emails from the Department of Education or from your school, emails that you wrote, perhaps requesting services, requesting an evaluation, requesting an IEP meeting to your school or CSE. It might include evaluations of your child in any area of suspected disability. And then 5 business days before your hearing date, you will email your documents to the Department of Education attorney or representative. Keep in mind that 5 business days will always be the same day of the week as your hearing, unless there's a holiday. So if your hearing is on a Thursday, your documents, your disclosure is due the Thursday before that. You can use scanner apps to scan the documents that you have, or to take clearer photos of them, so that you can use that to email those to the Department of Education representative if you don't have an office scanner at home.
And just to jump in, I know Allison said this, but it's 5 business days. So like if it's Labor Day, then it might be the Wednesday before it. So it's 5 days, not counting holidays.
Exactly, not counting weekends and holidays. So look for the documents also that you'll be receiving from the Department of Education. The Department of Education should send you their documents as well on that same day. If they send it afterwards, keep in mind that that is a rule, that each side has to send their documents 5 days ahead of time. So you can always mention that at the hearing if you didn't receive them on time. And then letter your documents from A to Z, and we'll mention this a little bit later, but the department's documents are numbered from 1 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and your documents will be identified by letter. And as a note, you do not need to send the disclosure documents to the hearing officer, just to the DOE attorney. So what may come next is a pre-hearing conference. This is a conversation the first time that you'll be speaking with the hearing officer and the DOE attorney. It should be fairly brief. The hearing officer will likely ask you the status of the case. For instance, will the case settle? Is the case proceeding to hearing? If the case will go forward to hearing, the hearing officer may then ask you and the DOE, how many witnesses do you intend to bring, and how long do you think you will need for each witness? You'll then choose the hearing dates, one or more dates. These days it tends to be more than 1 day. And you may need to ask to extend the compliance date. So the compliance date is a date similar to that email, the slide with the long email. The compliance date is the date that the hearing is supposed to conclude and the hearing officer would start to write their decision. Oftentimes the compliance date ends up being extended because you may need an additional date in order to have your witnesses speak, or you may be involved in settlement negotiations with the Department of Education and you need more time to finish those negotiations. So oftentimes the hearing officer will ask if anyone has a request about the compliance date, because the hearing officer cannot extend their own compliance date. So you can always request that the compliance date be extended, and the hearing officer can extend it usually for 30 days. If there is a time when you feel like your child will be harmed by an extension of time in the case, you can also share that with the hearing officer. Next steps. Select your witnesses. So this is going to be most likely yourself, right? You're the parent, you have a wealth of information about your child. Evaluators, anyone who's conducted an evaluation of your child, service providers, and it could include teachers as well. We'll get to that in a second. You would also send subpoenas to the hearing officer to sign. There's more about this in our Impartial hearing guide at the end of the email. There's a link that connects you to a lot more detail of the steps involved. But again, don't be daunted by the subpoena. A subpoena is just a letter asking, requiring that a party send documents that they have about your child to you so that you can use that for your evidence. So you would typically send the subpoena to your child's school, or it would be addressed to your child's school or to the CSE to provide documents about your child to you. And the hearing officer would hopefully would sign that. Then you want to prepare your documents as we talked about before. This is going to be if your first document is an IEP, that is 16 pages. You're going to number the letter, the first page A1, the second page will be A2, and so on until A16. If the second document is an evaluation, that's 10 pages. You'll start with B1, B2, and so on until B10. And then, very important, talk with your witnesses about what they will say. So, for instance, for you as the witness, you sort of know what your child's story is and background is. And just as information, you will not necessarily have to ask questions of yourself at the hearing. You will speak to the hearing officer directly about what you've observed about your child, what your concerns are, what you think the remedies should be, what you're seeking. For your other witnesses, you do want to ask them what they will say, what they think the concerns are, what concerns they have, what they think your child needs. Because you want to know that information before you go into the hearing, rather than any surprises at the hearing. And something to keep in mind is that if you have a teacher at a DOE school that you would like to speak to your child's needs, it's possible that because they work at the DOE and they work at the school, that they may have a conflict and they may not be able to, or they may not be speaking about the same needs that they may have spoken with you about before. They might have a limitation on what they can say. So make sure to talk with them before the hearing to see if they would be able to speak. So when you are actually at the hearing, which is going to be a phone call again, prepare, before the hearing, prepare a short opening statement. You will think of questions to ask the DOE witnesses, and that will be your cross-examination of the DOE witnesses. Think of questions to ask your witnesses, and that will be your direct examination of your witnesses, and prepare a brief closing statement. So again, when you're on this hearing call, the hearing officer will likely ask you first to, if either side has evidence, and you'll give them you will have emailed the hearing officer and the Department of Education representative your evidence, so your documents A through Z. The Department of Education may object to any of your documents, and you'll have an opportunity to explain to the hearing officer why your documents are relevant, or why they prove your case and why they should be included in the hearing. You may also object to the documents that the Department of Education is asking to be included, and say why you don't think that they are relevant. Maybe they go back too far in time, or something else that you think it makes them not purposeful for the hearing. Then each side will have the opportunity to make a brief opening statement about what the case is about, what each side is saying they're going to show at the hearing through their witnesses and through their documents, their papers. The DOE has the burden to go first and to prove their case that they provided a free, appropriate public education to the student. That's a term you may hear. It's often called a FAPE, which stands for free, appropriate public education. The DOE will ask questions of their witnesses, and then you will have an opportunity to ask those witnesses questions also, to sort of challenge them and ask them questions about what they said or what they've observed about your child. Then it will be your turn to present your witnesses and your case, and you will ask direct questions, and the DOE will have an opportunity to ask cross-examination of your witnesses. And the hearing officer may also have questions for your witnesses and for the DOE witnesses. And then you will hopefully have a few minutes to say or perhaps to submit a written statement of your closing argument, which is basically everything that you argued during the hearing. Okay, so talking with the Department of Education, you may want to speak with the DOE attorney before the hearing starts to find out what they're thinking about the case. Are they trying to get the case settled? Are they planning to go forward with the case? If they're planning to go forward with the case, ask who their witnesses are so that you have an idea of who's being called. You may know who those witnesses are, and that will help you to prepare. If the Department of Ed attorney asks you about your witnesses or about your case or what you're seeking or what happened, or why you're pursuing the hearing, only share information that's already in the hearing request. You don't want to share everything about the case or everything that's happened. You're going to prove that during the hearing, but only share what they already have in the hearing request. Save any emails that you get from the Department of Education. Take notes on conversations that you have with the Department of Education, whether that's the DOE attorney or representative, or a teacher at the school, or an evaluator, or someone further up the chain in the Department of Education. And don't agree to an oral settlement offer. So if you are asked to withdraw your hearing request, or even if you're asked to withdraw the hearing request based on something that a Department of Education attorney says they can offer you as a solution, you want to make sure you get that in writing. talking with the hearing officer. So if you email the hearing officer, always copy or include the Department of Education attorney when you email the hearing officer. At the hearing itself, again by phone, don't argue with the DOE attorney at the hearing. It can be tempting, but basically all of the arguments that you're making at the hearing are not to the Department of Education attorney, it's to the hearing officer. You're persuading the hearing officer of what your child needs and why you have concerns and why the remedies that you've found are appropriate. So if for instance, the Department of Education attorney objects to something you're saying or trying to enter into evidence, don't explain to the don't explain to the DOE attorney why it's relevant or important. Explain that to the hearing officer. So a word about settlement. Again, don't agree to withdraw your hearing, even if, unless you have an agreement signed by you and the Department of Education, and that's very important. If you are working on a settlement negotiation or a stipulation with the department and it's basically final, you've signed it, and you're waiting for the Department of Education to sign it, don't withdraw that hearing until you have the final signature from the Department of Education. As for the decision of the hearing officer, once you've concluded the hearing officer, the decision is due 45 days after the resolution period or 14 days after the hearing. However, the reality is that impartial hearings can take many months to complete. As we noted, the compliance date can be extended in order for witnesses to testify and for the parties to be ready to go forward. So that's an approximation. And again, remember, with any extensions that are requested by the Department of Education or that come up, make sure to tell the hearing officer if an extension of time will harm your child. If your child is out of school or not receiving certain services, you should note that for the record. And also tell the hearing officer if it would be helpful to have an extension of time so that your witnesses can testify. Decisions are final unless you appeal them or unless the Department of Education appeals them to the State Review Office, which is the next level of review. If you do so, there are timelines for filing the appeal that are actually pretty quick. And I would refer you to the Impartial Hearing Guide linked at the end of the presentation that has more details on how to appeal your case if you disagree. And here they are. So here are the resources. We have our guide to impartial hearings, which is very detailed. This is also, the next one is a link to the impartial hearing request form that we spoke about towards the beginning. The DOE also has website also has a section on impartial hearings. And once your decision is complete, especially if you agree with the decision, you may need to follow up with the DOE implementation unit at the number listed here to make sure that the DOE carries out the decision and anything you've won in the decision. And finally, if you're appealing, this website also has more on how you can appeal. It's the State Education Department website on how you can appeal to the State Review Officer. And we have a poll.
All right, poll coming up. This is actually our last poll for the training. So it's really it's one survey. It's a really quick survey. So just 4 yes or no questions. I'm putting it out there now. So if you can answer those quickly, that would be great. Also, if you have, I see a couple more questions have come in on the Q&A, but if you have other questions that we can answer, please feel free to type them in. And at this point, we could try to take them orally and just answer them if you have other questions. Otherwise, after this, there's a couple more slides about contacting us, and then it's over. Somebody raised their hand. I think what we would prefer to do because we do record these and share these, is if you can put your question in the Q&A and then we can answer it out loud.
I'm noticing Ms. Zamaya's question about what a parent can do when a parent is having a verbal conversation and is told unacceptable comments or unacceptable language. And Kim, to follow up on Kim's answer, if this is at the impartial hearing, you should do exactly what Kim suggested. If this is not happening at the impartial hearing, then you should do what Allison suggested. One, you should take notes. You should, when the conversation is finished, say, make sure you put the date, make sure you remember who you were speaking with and what the contents of that conversation were. And I think in terms of if you're looking forward to go to a hearing, you want to make sure you have the best recollection you can have of conversations you had with people in preparation for the hearing.
Okay. And another question that came in was, can we get a basic template for hearing request? That's actually in one of the hyperlinks. So when we send you the PowerPoint, some of the things that had kind of different color letters with the lines underneath it means that it's actually a hyperlink. So if you click on it, it will open up a web page. And the DOE does have a hearing request that lays out the sections that you need to fill in. I think in terms of what you need to say, it's pretty hard to do a template that would apply to every situation. In our office, we have very legal templates for things, but it's something that it's hard to share with people because it's pretty nuanced. I think the best thing that you could do is going through this training, looking at the sections where we were talking about, try to think about what the problem is and how you prove it. Is it that the IEP is wrong? Is it that the IEP isn't implemented? Is it that your child isn't doing well and you're not even sure why, so you need a good evaluation and you think you need something more immediately like tutoring or more counseling, if that makes sense. So making sure that you're describing both the problem, which most people calling us for help on our helpline and trying to figure out what to do know what the problem is. It's figuring out the solution that's a little bit more tricky. And it is important to try to figure out what the solution is. I think one misconception people have of hearing officers is that they're going to be able to come up with a solution for you, or they could order that a private school accept your child. That unfortunately is not how this works. So hearing officers are much better equipped to order something if you have done research and found a private school, a tutor, or a methodology that the DOE could perhaps use. For example, if your child has dyslexia, the DOE has more and more programs that are geared towards students with learning disabilities like dyslexia that might be helpful, but if they're not offered in your child's school, how does that help? That's a situation that you might be able to resolve it without going to hearing. You might be able to go up the chain and try to get a resolution, but if you're getting stuck and you need to go to hearing, that's certainly something that you could ask for. Hopefully that helps answer the template question. Another question that came in is, this is a really good question. Big question, what's the best step if your child's school isn't adhering to the IEP and saying the reason is staff limitations due to the pandemic? I got some of this last spring and I'm concerned it will come up again this fall. My child is in ICT with a variety of services and will be going fully remote. Yes, I hate to tell you, but I would be concerned too. Although I do think that they're a little bit better with a plan, I'm really worried about ICT. I think that there will be 2 teachers. At least they're supposed to have 2 teachers in the remote classes. I think for anyone going in person to a school in ICT, I'm not so clear that there's going to be 2 teachers. And then how many students will those teachers have in a remote class? That's also a little unclear in how it will work. One thing that I can definitely answer is that they are not supposed to say, we can't do the IEP because we have staffing limitations. That's the kind of thing that happens pre pandemic all the time. Like we think, oh, we understand why you need more SATs, you know, more reading support, for example, but we don't have that person here, so we can't do it. That's a situation that, you know, I actually had for my own son, where I've had, you know, to file a few hearings for him. And after trying to go up the chain and not being successful, I said, you know what, I'm going to file a hearing to try to get you those services. You don't have them, but the DOE as a whole does. I think for the pandemic situation, trying to make sure that, you know, in the spring, it was what's on the remote learning plan. If you don't agree with the remote learning plan, you know, let's say you had 4 sessions of speech that were 45 minutes long and they gave you 2 30-minute sessions of speech, things like that we were hearing about all the time. Try to get the plan. There's going to be a new plan for this fall that will cover both hybrid and remote. We don't know exactly what it will look like, but definitely make sure you get a copy of that. If you don't agree with it, they do not have the authority to change the IEP because of the pandemic. That was something we were nervous about in April. We thought that perhaps the feds or the state was going to say that was okay. They have not. They said you have to follow the IEP. It doesn't mean that in reality it's happened for students, but it does mean they're not allowed to just say, sorry, COVID, we can't do that. So you should be putting stuff in writing and saying, I don't agree with that. That's very much the kind of case that we would like to hear about at Advocates for Children. So if you want to write in through our website or call our helpline, I know sometimes, you know, you can be on hold. Our office is actually closed for the next couple days, but if you want to send us a note afterwards, we definitely can try to talk to you about what happened. And if you get to the fall and your fears are correct that things are not what you want them to be, please let us know. Those are the cases that we get a whole, you know, get those and ask up the chain for you at the DOE, and it helps us with our policy work, and it often helps get solutions for people. So that's a really good question, and one which I wish I had a better answer for, except that I would think you may not need to go to hearing for it. Hopefully you can get it resolved. Okay, there's a lot of questions coming in. Let me type that one. Sorry, I'm just reviewing them. Okay. A situation where a student is being discriminated against for his or her disability, not provided accommodations, and is bullied and humiliated by a teacher on a regular basis. After a teacher did 5 reports to OSI, nothing happened and it became worse. Attorneys were consulted, said it was civil liberties case and it's hard to win. Meanwhile, this teacher created anxiety and school refusal. Former situation I know of, but it happens a lot and it isn't as cut and dry. That's a tough question to answer. I mean, obviously a teacher should not be bullying a student. OSI, I think sometimes works, but a lot of times people feel frustrated with it. That's the office at the DOE where people complain about, you know, teachers bullying a student or something happening like that. I do think that if it's a student that has an IEP, and you said in this case it was, if they're not provided accommodations and the teacher is not providing instruction, that's something that, you know, you can ask for mediation. I would go up the chain maybe centrally through special education as opposed to through OSI. OSI will start a formal investigation of the teacher, but special education may just want to resolve the situation. So, you know, there's a few different things that come up, you know, for this parent and the student, probably getting that student out of that classroom and into a place that's better, or getting the teacher out of that classroom and getting a better teacher in is the most immediate thing, as opposed to getting a, you know, a finding against the teacher or civil damages against them. We don't handle civil damages cases at AFC, but we do work with some private attorneys who we can refer people to, but I do know those are really tough cases. So often going up the chain to try to resolve it can work, or filing a mediation or a hearing. Okay, sorry, hold on. Oh, and somebody asked if this will be recording. Yep, it will be. This recording will be provided tomorrow. Okay, and somebody else, oh, the person who was asking, or someone else maybe was asking about saying that their child is so far behind that even with multiple evaluations are saying that, and that with remote learning, he's shutting down entirely. How realistic is it to ask for this now? You know, I think you definitely should ask for this. I can completely understand. It is a really tough time for many families and for many students. I have a high school kid myself with a complex disability, and it's pretty hard to watch how, you know, depressed and shut down he's gotten from not being around his friends. One of the things we were talking about earlier was, you know, if you asked him last year, hey, no school for 6 months, he would be like, yay. But it turns out he didn't mean it because he misses school so bad. On the other hand, is it safe to go back? Is there going to be a bus? Is it the right decision? It's a really, really tough decision. And despite all of that, sometimes I feel like that decision is almost an illusion of control. When you unpeel it, remote, hybrid, all of it is not ideal, right? All of our kids are having a lot of trouble right now. And I think it is a good time to ask for it. Certainly you can call in through our helpline and we can try to brainstorm what might work. If you have ideas for what might work, I would advocate for it now. It's true that there's, you know, a real budget crunch, but that doesn't mean that your child's rights should be trampled. And, you know, if you can come up with a solution, it might cost them a lot less, to be honest, to try to fix something now than to have a student who's years and years behind down the road. The tough part is how do you fix it? And you know, that's a hard one. Okay. And another question came in about when they use the remote learning plan to reduce services. They're not supposed to do that. So what I would say is document that. How remote learning plans were supposed to be rolled out and how they were rolled out, two different things. They were supposed to be conversations with parents, agreement on things. At least from what I saw, many parents didn't even know they were done, didn't see them till they asked afterwards. I think this next go around hopefully will be different, and you should be asking your school now, how are you planning to provide my child's IEP services? And if they're saying by cutting them and you think that's wrong, you should speak up. So for example, for my own son, they might be doing 30-minute sessions instead of 45-minute sessions. I don't think I'm going to object to that because, to be honest, the remote day for him gets so packed and it's pretty hard to figure it out. For some services, it makes more sense than others. I haven't really figured out what I'm going to do with that, but I think about what you think your child needs. If that doesn't sound right and you disagree and it's on the IEP is still a legal binding document that they have to enforce. They can't just say, sorry, pandemic. So if they're trying to cut services, you do have a legal right to object to that. Something that you should call in through our helpline, all the things that we went through in terms of escalations, mediation, state complaint, impartial hearing. Those are options for you. So if that's what's happening, and it's a problem for your child, speak up. A lot of people couldn't handle the work, in terms of supporting related services at home, for example, when everything was remote. And so some people said, we can't do it. I think you might still have a comp services argument there, but it is a little bit tougher. Okay. Okay. It looks like these are already, they're sort of, follow-ups on the same questions. How did the comp services, how to go about comp services when they've already denied them? I mean, I guess it depends on denied them in a hearing, then you appeal. If they've denied them at an IEP meeting, go up the chain, call our helpline and see. It's something that there are a lot of people trying to figure out how to do something systemically on that. So it's certainly an issue we're flagging. If it's something where, you have a solution and you haven't been able to get it by going up the chain, it sounds like you may have been going up the chain being the thing that we showed you earlier, where it's informal dispute resolution. And I certainly would try an email to special education at schools.nyc.gov. That's something that, maybe it will get resolved. Otherwise, filing a hearing would make a lot of sense. Okay. I think that's everything. That's not sort of a follow-up on another thing. Oh, and somebody else asked, my request for an independent evaluation was denied last year, and I want to challenge that. Yes, although you could also do another request for it. And that's an interesting one. It depends on what happened. I know I keep saying call our helpline, but the thing with independent evaluation requests is that they actually can't really just deny them. They're supposed to either grant them quickly, you know, or with, I can't remember the exact language. I don't know if Allison or Athy remember them, but the language is something like, within a reasonable time, respond to the parent or take the parent to a hearing to say they don't need an evaluation, our evaluations are sufficient. Now, I'm not encouraging the DOE to take a whole bunch of parents to hearing, but I think them just saying, no, that's also not supposed to happen. So if you want to write into us or call in and let us know what happened, that might be the kind of thing that we could go up the chain for you. You could also reach out to special education, putting in a new request and say why you need it and what you're asking for. Sometimes it's more nuanced than that, that they'll say, okay, we agree with an independent evaluation, but we'll give you, you know, $3,000 for a neuropsych that typically costs $5,000. I don't know the numbers right now. I think, Allison, you might have a better sense to what those are these days.
Something
but
like that.
Yeah, that's a different battle. And we have seen people go to hearing for independent evaluations, but it's, you know, it's not something that you should have to. I think in our impartial hearing guide, we may have this. If not, it's definitely on our website. There's some things about independent evaluations and how to get them. Also, the DOE has a document that I would encourage you to Google and look for called the Standard Operating Procedures Manual, or we call it the SOPM. It's actually, I think even the DOE calls it the SOPM. If you, for special education, if you Google that, it's the guide for principals to look at for how this works. And there's a section in there about granting independent educational evaluations, or IEs, basically when you want an outside evaluation. And that's certainly something to look at, so that if you're getting a no, we don't think we need to do one, you know, that could help. Oh, and somebody asked for, please put the slide back up. Oh, I think we already did that, right?
Which
best
one?
way, the slide back up with the best way to contact you.
Oh.
We are going to do that.
This.
Yep. So that's our helpline and our the email that you can use. I should let you know we are closed after today until Tuesday. It's an office-wide closure. So I'm sorry, there's going to be a delay with that. Also on our helpline, it varies how busy it is, but if you are on hold and there's a voicemail, you should know we do check those voicemails and answer them. So you can leave a voicemail there. Also, we have an incredible amount of information on our website. And we have a YouTube channel where videos like this or webinars like this are saved and archived so you can watch them. We have one on special ed. We have one on summer services, which obviously isn't, you know, relevant anymore. One on behavioral interventions during COVID, and all kinds of things on there. And we're going to keep adding to it. One other plug, we are going to have weekly lunchtime sessions on Facebook Live starting next Thursday, the 10th. At 12:30, we're going to do one in English, and at 1:30 in Spanish. After that, it's going to be every Wednesday. And these will be on our website, that how to click into it, or you can find it on our Facebook page. But the idea with that is that we get a lot of questions, and as I know, I don't have to tell all of you, the ground is moving constantly. So, you know, 2 days ago, we would have given you a different start date for school than we did after yesterday. Next week, maybe I'll have a different answer about ICT teachers. I don't know. And so to try to keep people up to speed, we're doing these short segments, just telling you everything that we know, or we'll try to answer questions as they come in. The questions that you've asked today about, especially what happens when they're not giving me the services, those are the kind of questions we get a lot. And it's really helpful for us to hear that people are still hearing that, and to hear the details of what they're hearing, and for you to know that that's not the way it's supposed to be happening. All right, let me just see if there's any other questions. Oh, and So they said, I'm sorry, the person who was asking for the independent evaluation said they just sent a letter saying no IEE, and it came directly from the CPSC. So it's preschool. That's depressing. The SOPM guide that I was talking about is school age, so I hadn't realized it was preschool, but the same law is there. Certainly that's something you can write into us about. You can also go to special education and see if you can get a different answer. I've seen those letters a lot. I've seen them from CSEs too, where they just say no, but they're not supposed to. On the other hand, you know, you don't necessarily want them to take you to a hearing. So hopefully there's a way to work it out and to get the independent evaluation. Someone else asked again about the slides. We are going to send these out. Oh, it was turning 5. Okay. Turning 5 for some reason has seemed, at least from what I've seen, a bit messier this year. And that's too bad because I feel like in the past years, like I've been at AFC for 15 years. I started when I sued when my son was in early intervention, and he's now in high school. And I can tell you that the turning 5 process has gotten better and better and better. But this year it seems pretty bumpy. We've had a lot of people who didn't receive placement offers. And when we asked the DOE, they claimed that they were sent, but the parent never got them. And things like that. So I think there's been some communication breakdown during COVID, or maybe a computer glitch. I'm not sure. But that doesn't sound like a computer glitch. That sounds like more traditional, them just stonewalling your request, and they're not supposed to do that. On the other hand, to get an IE, you're going to want to try to show why your child needs one. Okay. Let's just see if there's any other questions coming in. Yes, somebody asked, will this webinar be sent to us? Yes, it will be. It's going to be sent probably tomorrow by the end of the day. And you'll get the PowerPoint and the recording so that you can click on the links. Also, at the end of this, when we stop this, if you stay on, the next thing that will pop up will be something from Google. And there'll be a way to click and complete our survey. It's just another plug. We really do read the surveys. They help us a lot. If there's specific trainings you would like us to do, let us know. If there's things you didn't like about today, you know, the sound system wasn't good. I couldn't hear Kim Madden, or she rambled on too much. Whatever it is, put it in there. It really helps us understand how to make these trainings helpful for you, and what you need to hear about. Okay. Anything else? I think we're done. Oh, one more. Okay. And somebody asked about doing a seminar with the CBO. We are trying to do more Zoom webinars, and this webinar you should certainly feel free to share with your CBO. And if you go on our YouTube page, it's one positive effect from the COVID thing for us is that we got really creative in terms of trying to package webinars from all of our different projects at AFC and get as much information out there and record it with these PowerPoints, with the resources and hyperlinks. So there's a lot of information there. I'm not saying we can't do a training at a CBO. We certainly can. We're trying to maximize as much as possible doing these bigger, open to everybody trainings, and sometimes partnering with CBOs. So. Okay. Great. Thanks so much, everybody. And hopefully we'll see you again at another training.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.